All right, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Coffee and Chat with Rev Bruce. Hope everything's going good for you. Hope everything's going your way. And I am right here making sure that this is a good day for you. And I want to share some inspiration with you. This schedule that you see up here, this is what we're doing for the remainder of the month, Black History Month, looking at inspiring individuals and incidents in Black history, right? As we talk about basically different concepts, different ideas, different parts of, Black culture that we are uh, we are rooted to. And so, in doing this, today is self determination, Kujichagulia. Next week, we'll look at collective working responsibility, Ujima. And then finally, on the 27th, we'll look at faith, Imani, and how that is part of the Black culture, the Black heritage, the Black history that we celebrate this month. And so, definitely get a load of that and understand, what we're sharing here and understand what we're doing. And so, just so you know, right? Just so you know, this is weekly. This is what we're doing. This is just something. No guests this month for Black History Month. A lot of other people have guests putting on segments and things of that nature. But I just wanted to focus on a couple of matters, like I said, for Black History Month that really sometimes we bypass those. Sometimes we bypass these. Sometimes people don't put much emphasis on them. And so trying to make sure that as a people, we understand that there is more to it than just what we may hear on the regular of the Harriet Tubmans, the Martin Luther Kings, every now and then the Frederick Douglass stories. And so going beyond that and looking at some other aspects of Black history. And so taking this into account, right? I want to put some focus today on, like I said, self-determination, Kujichagulia, right? Kujichagulia. And so as we look at self-determination, let's get in here and just really define what it is, right? And so as we define what self-determination is, I'm going to get into some other terminology that helps us look at it as well, because at different points, we are going to see that there can be some confusion about self-determination, Kujichagulia, and what other people may oppose from a spiritual stance of where it might be looked at as substituting something. And I just want to make sure I'm clear with that. And so self-determination is believing you can control your own destiny. Self-determination is a combination of attitudes and abilities that lead people to set goals for themselves and to take initiative to reach these goals. That sounds perfect for a lot of what I'm talking about today. And a lot of what I'm talking about today, some of y'all will look at me and say, man, God bless you. I didn't know that. And other folks are going to look and say, man, you need to leave that over there, But God bless. This is for, like the Lord said, let him who have ears to hear, let him hear it, right? And so when we talk about this, self-determination is a lot of what people try to apply in when we talk about different success and self-help, personal growth plans. And so when we talk about self-determination, that involved initiative, that involved the goals, that involved going after those goals, that involved having that inner strength. And so when we talk about self-determination, it's that drive, that internal fortitude, that it's that thing within you that keeps pushing you to break down barriers and push through barriers and obstacles and keep going. Yeah, it's enduring, but I like I like what they said about it. I like what they said about it. It's not just enduring, but it also is the idea that you have control over choices, right? And that, you know, you can do something about it, right? And that you believe, right? You believe in that control and that it's part of your destiny. And it's about attitude and abilities, right? Attitude and abilities. It's not just that I'm able to, it's that I have an attitude about it. It's beyond just, you know, the strength of a John Henry in, you know, in legend, but it's the strength of a John Henry and the idea of the little engine that could, and I know I can, I know I can, right? It's that idea behind that where not only do I have the ability to do it, but I have an attitude that sets me up to accomplish what I'm going to do, and I'm taking initiative with it, right? And so I think a lot of people get lost when we talk about this, and the they don't see themselves as being one who takes initiative. They don't see themselves as being one who is, uh, you know, a person of ability. And so scratch all that, and take this on for what it means and what it is. And when we talk about Kujichagulia, there are some simple things about that. Like I said, it's that inner strength, that drive, that keeps you determined, that keeps you working on something, that keeps you moving. Not only that, it's relevant to enduring, right? But not simply enduring, but as we talk about the whole idea of slavery later on, we're going to get into that, and so I don't want to bore you all day, but think about it as this internal fortitude that is much like horsepower when we talk about muscle cars, like when we talk about a Buick Grand National or a Mustang pushing off of the race line and drag racing down, and that horsepower kicks in, and that boom, you know, that vroom, it pushes that engine, and everything goes, and that car pushes forward. That's what Kujichagulia is like. Okay. And so when we talk about that, that's what we're talking about. And so get into this with me. This allows people to feel that they have control of their choices and their lives, right? That you have the freedom to make decisions about your life and other choices you have. That's within your control. And it has an impact on motivation, right? That people feel more motivated to take action when they feel that what they do will have an effect on the outcome. That you lend a hand to things coming about. That what you do plays a role in it turning into a positive outcome. Think about that. How much more impact would there be of you getting something done? How much more initiative would be on your part if you knew that what you were doing was going to lead to the positive outcome or the desired outcome that you want to take place? And so that's part of where we see Kujichagulia and self-determination benefiting us, that we're motivated, we're more motivated, we're highly motivated to do things on our behalf when we see what our engagement can be and what impact our engagement can have, right, on us reaching those goals, right? We're going to talk about it later on, but by any means necessary has a lot to do with Kujichagulia. By any means necessary has a lot to do with self-determination, that I'm going to get through with this. I'm going to get to this no matter what. Let me say it like this. There's another aspect to this, right? And that means that it's a force that will keep you driving forward. It's a force that will keep you driving forward. It's an idea, right? It's an idea that it sets you on a path, right? It sets you on a path, and that pathway is towards fulfillment fulfillment of your goals, fulfillment of your dreams, right? It's that fulfillment and this inner strength that you get, right, is to keep you striving forward. And like I said, it's like horsepower, but it is related to what we say with the quote of "by any means necessary," quoted much from Malcolm X, but also from Frederick Douglass, right? And so when we talk about this and we talk about Kujichagulia, go back to what have been the studies of slave revolts, right? And I'll take you to when I was at Morehouse and I had to study U.S. history, and part of what we were doing there was looking at it. And one of the former professors at Spelman, noted historian Howard Zinn, and what he covered with slave revolts breaks down how this Kujichagulia has been part of our, destiny, our work, our livelihood for centuries. And when he covers these slave revolts, what we have to understand is all slave revolts were not armed resistance, right? All slave revolts were not armed resistance. And so part of what came about with this was a lot of people, they were able to endure the hardship of slavery because they believed in the concept of, well, one day freedom's going to come, right? And when you listen to the slave narratives, when you listen to the songs of the slaves, the sorrow songs, as W.B. Du Bois called them, they break down the relationship and the correlation of the African Americans who were enslaved, the enslaved Africans who were singing these songs, how they were seeing themselves and identifying themselves with the children of Israel who were under this, enslavement in Egypt, and they were awaiting a redeemer of Moses. And so with that, freedom came with Moses to them in Egypt. And so that was part of the endurance that many Africans enslaved Africans saw while they were in slavery. Now, break this down. Some folks were of the, it's going to come someday, and I've just got to hold on, and I know it's going to come about, even if I don't see it, and the chariot comes and takes me home. I know even if the old ship of Zion comes and takes me home with King Jesus as the captain, I know that freedom will still come to my people if it doesn't come to me personally. And I know that even my own passing will lead to me not having to deal with this treachery of slavery anymore. But flip it, there also were those who engaged in proactive activity, right, who felt like they could lend a hand to the outcome of what was going to happen. And those folks engaged in slave revolts as well as slave resistance. Now, let me tell you about slave revolts. We know about Nat Turner's, we know about Denmark Vesey's, you know what I mean? And so those slave revolts, and when we talk about those and how those individuals were able to lead revolts, even though those revolts might have been actually, some of them curtailed, some of them held up, some of them even taken to the point where people felt that they were squashed. They still had lasting impact on not only other slaves, but also the laws in which white Americans tried to rule slaves, those that were enslaved, in which they tried to control and contain. And so the resistance spread out throughout different ways, and they tried to squash resistance. You didn't hear a lot about what was happening in Haiti and the islands and other places where slaves were revolting and burning sugarcane fields on the islands, and taking the rum that they were forced to make and using that as almost like a lighter fluid and torching the fields. If nothing else, we're not going to have to pick this cane anymore, but we're going to get this done. And so that determination of like, we're going to get out of this, by any means necessary. We're going to get out of this. And that whole notion of slave revolt took on another level. A lot of it took on a spiritual level. Nat Turner was a priest, a preacher, right? And he preached, freedom, liberation, right? Denmark Vesey was a Sunday school teacher. He preached freedom, liberation. Let's why are we talking about it and not doing anything about it? Why are we talking about it and not seeking it out? If we believe that this is what God is talking about, beyond slaves obey your masters, why aren't we doing something about it? And so that was the same inspiration for what we learned is the appeal by David Walker. David Walker just simply took what the word said, right, and reiterated what the word said and put it in a plain view for people to see and say, hey, if this is the case, then why are we still having this argument about slavery? And I mean, that led to David Walker being a wanted man by many in the South because of what his pamphlet, The Appeal, did to stir up sentiments among those who were enslaved as well as those who were free about those who were enslaved. John Brown, led by his own personal faith, right? Harper's Ferry is just that's just one part of John Brown's existence. It's one part of his resistance and his fight to end slavery. John Brown was, his work, was oh my God, man, that was so. It's so interesting when you look at John Brown and his fervor, his religious fervor for getting things done. And so that idea of, we have a religious obligation as people of faith to see an end to slavery, that was part of John Brown. As a white abolitionist, John Brown saw this as a necessity to us all of us truly being free, because this enslavement was a stain, right? And it was staying on the faith that even whites said they had, because here it is, how can we claim to be of the love of Christ if we still have brothers and sisters in bondage, right? And so that's the gist of that. And so going back to Kujichagulia, going back to, beyond armed slave revolts, slaves used to break up the tools. They used to tear up the tools. They used to make the cows sick, the ox sick, the mule sick. They used to do something they called putting one on massa, right? Where they would actually even make the master and the overseer sick, those that, had access. And so those were different things that happened. The conjure woman was said to put a hex on master and his children and all these different things. The wheels on the equipment were broken. The handles and on the shovels were broken, and all these different things were damaged and sabotaged so that people couldn't do the work, right? And a lot of people, they paid a price later. They took lashes and things like that. but there was a resistance that was beyond the armed resistance. There was a resistance that said, you know what, we're not going to do this and just comply with it. And then there was a belief to carry us out of slavery. There was a belief to go ahead and move forward, that my self-determination is that I will be free. Henry Box Brown, a self-determination. You don't climb and hide in a box and travel that great distance like that and survive without some self-determination. Frederick Douglass, you don't have that incident early in your youth of your master discovering your mistress sharing with you how to read and understand letters, and what did he tell her? If you teach him how to read, if you teach one of them how to read, there'll be no good for slavery. And that was a fact, because from that point on, Frederick Douglass said that was his determination. Look, I was destined to be free from that, because I had a taste of what this man said would make me ill fit to be a slave. Think about it. Self-determination has been something that has gotten African Americans through a lot and into a lot, right? We've gotten through slavery. We've gotten through this thing. And now here it is where we're talking about people that were self-determined to get their freedom. Harriet Tubman, if we really want to look at the Harriet Tubman story, her self-determination led to the freedom of others. That she said, look, I've not only got to get my own freedom, but I've got to help others get freedom. So when we look at this, we can't sit up here and just say, oh, well, you know, it's just about this, it's just about that. No, it's about the freedom that Tubman was able to acquire for herself as well as others, right? And with this whole idea of she just didn't stop, right? She just didn't stop at herself, right? And so self-determination has a potential of growth, outward growth, that it becomes something that we believe can be tapped into in order to reach another, right? When we say each one teach one, each one reach one, we are talking about, listen, you've got to understand that there's something in us, right, beyond just taking it, beyond just accepting it. And so, boom, here we go. A whole lot of holy folks are going to have a problem because they get tripped up with this and confusing this with the power derived and dispensed from the unction of the Holy Spirit. They're both related to power. They both have different functions, but not the same function. And the confusion usually is due to our truly limited vocabulary, right? That we aren't able to really get into that. Self-determination is more of a mentality that motivates, initiates, causes one to take action, right? As opposed to where we talk about the Holy Spirit is one that comes along to help us, right? One that is the paraclete, the paracletus, right? And so let's not get this twisted. We can still be spiritual people. We can still be people of faith and still talk about self-determination. Let's not confuse when we talk about the work of the soul versus the work of the mind and our attitudes and our abilities. So let's keep that straight. There's a difference. And let's put this into perspective. There also is we have to be real about there's a sector of Black folks that are anti-African as well, and they feel, right, that in it being something that includes Swahili or Kiswahili, right? That that's some African stuff. We ain't African. We Black Americans. We Afro Americans. We whatever you trying to go through right now, right? There are groups, sectors of Black people who are not pro-African. Let's just be like that. They're not for Pan-Africanism. They're not for Swahili or Kiswahili, anything African. They're like, I've been in America. My dad was in America, and God bless them. But this is still part of Black history. And so let's take it for what it is and, not get our focus on the wrong thing. And so taking it back to Kujichagulia, this is the same, right? The same aspect of our culture that led individuals during the Reconstruction to go forward with one of the most prolific political engagements of our time. During the Reconstruction, Blacks were more engaged in politics than any other time, and we had more Black representatives than any other time. This was a different time period, and so can you imagine that in the 1800s, blacks were among the first Republicans? Did you hear me? Blacks were among the first Republicans, and there's a reason for that. What the Republican Party stood for at that time was something different. They originally ran on a platform that had John C. Fremont, one of the men known for the expedition and conquering of California and the West. He was one of the first Republican Party candidates, and they were on an anti-slavery platform. Imagine that, right? And so that's what the original Republicans were about. Their primary agenda was against the expansion of slavery, and they were also about the abolishment of slavery. And so during this time, when we talk about, Hiram Revels and others who became these African Americans who held Senate seats and were governors and were presidents of Alabama A&M and all these other colleges and were active with the Freedmen's Bureau and all of these different things. These people were politically active with a Republican agenda. No. It doesn't match what we have today as a Republican Party. But understand that this was what history, right? What accurate history tells us and shows us. The Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, right? And that was about this abolishment of slavery. And so while we're talking all this stuff about impeachment and everything that's going on with a recent president, think about it like this. Andrew Johnson the fight for his impeachment was based upon the control and what he did for blacks against the South and for other Northerners to come in and take over parts of the South during the Reconstruction. And so the Reconstruction is for African Americans, that's like Pentecost for Christians, right? The Reconstruction is this point where everything exploded, everything blew up, and it was, we were in another place. And so shift to the deal, right, that pushes out the soldiers from the South, that pushes out the containment and restraint of Confederate former Confederates. Take on this whole new idealism that comes out of the Democratic Party. And then the ushering in of the Klan and Jim Crow and all of these things. And so from there, right, now you have blacks taking self-determination to another level of not being politically involved, but having to survive the violence, having to survive the attacks, having to survive the caricatures of minstrels and people in blackface and all these different things. We just got rid of Aunt Jemima, didn't we? We just got rid of Aunt Jemima. Aunt Jemima and all that stuff of these negative stereotype images of black folks was still what black people had to endure and had to move forward from. And so now, take this into account. This idea of Kujichagulia is something that we need to instill in our children, right? We send our children to places where they're not going to necessarily learn about who they were and who their people were throughout history. And so we have an obligation to teach them, but also to instruct them that when you go into these places and these spaces that are to fill your brain and mind with all these different ideas and concepts and help you develop skills, understand from what perspective they're taught, understand from what perspective things are being shared, and understand that there's another side of history and culture that is your own that may not be reflected in these places you go to. When you go to work, you may not have a Black History celebration. It may be a multicultural celebration where they mix in different things and all that other stuff along with Valentine's Day. When you go to school, it may not happen. And when you go into these other spaces, it may not happen. But understand for yourself who you are and where your history comes from, who you are and what you are possible of making. Understand, self-determination is what got, right? That's what got a Madam C.J. Walker, right, into a position of being one of the wealthiest individuals of her time, all because of what she saw for Black women and their hair products based upon her own negative experience with her hair and the image of that. Think about it. Self-determination is what got a Booker T. Washington to open a Tuskegee Institute, right? And get support from corporate America, from the government, and from other individuals within the Black community to send their children to a college operated by a Black man. Self-determination is what got him from being a former child born just as slavery was ending and to work and get his own education at Hampton and move on to open something of a similar institution with the Tuskegee Institute. That's what self-determination is. Self-determination is what got W.E.B. Du Bois to work with other individuals in the Niagara movement that later on became the NAACP, that where he was the editor of the Crisis. And when he had too many African images of pyramids and of Africans and of individuals that looked like they were kings and queens in another place, when he was no longer the editor, but removed as the editor of the Crisis for the NAACP, self-determination still led him to be one of the most read scribes of our time. I want to get you to understand that self-determination is something that pushes us beyond the limits, that pushes us beyond the boundaries, that pushes us beyond and over the obstacles that time and history have set before us. And here we are again. Here we are standing, self-determined, that we are in places that people never expected us to be. We're in positions that people never expected from us. And we're still here because people still didn't expect us to make it. I dare somebody to look up a place called Liberia. I dare somebody to look up a place called Liberia and a place called Monrovia and let me know if the history doesn't tell you that these were places that were not set up not set up as part of, original Africa, but these were set up as places for, look, now that we're done having y'all in here and having y'all as slaves, y'all need to get up out of here, right? Y'all need to go, right? Wait a minute. After we built this place, after the blood, sweat, tears, and the stripes of the lash, and the picking of cotton and tobacco and all these different things, and striving to just survive. Now, after all this, you say, go back to where we stole you from and start over. And so many people during the 1800s went off and went back to Africa, to what is known as Liberia, right? And they actually got started. Name the capital after James Monrovia, whatever that means. But God bless us, we still are people striving to, maintain ourselves. If we don't understand it, if we don't get it right, we will be lost and miss half of our history, half of what has been going on. I dare you, look it up. It's the truth. It's in the books, right? It was part of U.S. policy, right? And so the whole idea of the Negro problem, right? The idea of, now that they're no longer enslaved, what do we do with them? No, self-determination has provided us a means to stay here in the United States and still obtain success and still obtain standing. Are we where we want to be? No, but we still are on the move, getting there and bringing generations upon generations up. We still have stuff we've got to address. We still have stuff we've got to attack. But listen up. We're doing something about it. We're conscious of it. And so with our consciousness, let us take this self-determination and let it drive us forward. Let it allow us to teach and instill within other generations the ability to do the impossible under circumstances that are weighing heavily against us, right? We've got to understand what we see today is not how it's always been. And I think that's hard for a lot of people who have grown up and seen everything integrated. Everybody in the same classrooms, everybody in the same communities, and everybody, in the same employment. It hasn't always been like that. And so when you still have people that are of a certain age that come from, a couple of generations ago that say, hey, this isn't how it was. There's a reason behind that. And the idea that we still have this self-determination to achieve what we believe is amazing. Listen, this is one more aspect of Black history that we need to look at, that we need to understand. That this isn't an offense to any of us that have a Christian or Catholic faith. This isn't an offense to that. When we talk about self-determination, it's about an attitude and choices that we make and decisions that we make, the initiative that we take, right? We need to understand, for those people that are, not accepting of, the idea of Afrocentric thought of anything that is African, right? And who still may be Black. This is high time that we understand it's time to get beyond that. Think about it, and think about how this fits in to taking initiative, taking control, and having yourself as a vessel, right, by which history and culture and heritage and all of these things can continually propel people forward. I could have went into a whole bunch of folks, right, throughout history that self-determination got them through. I could have went into a Wilma Rudolph. Self-determination got her through despite her condition, right? A Ray Charles, self-determination got him through despite his condition. Listen, there's a whole bunch of people, despite their condition, despite their circumstances, still pulled it off. Johnson Publishing that had to borrow some money from his mama, but he got it started, and we ended up with Jet Magazine and numerous other publications. And so, listen to me. It's self-determination that I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit. Go on and check out The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. That's about self-determination that even though these things are not in my favor, I'm still going to pursue it till the end, and it'll be for my betterment and my success. Listen, this has been Coffee and Chat with Rev Bruce. I appreciate you hanging in there. I appreciate you tuning in. God bless. Have a great day. Amen.